Have you ever noticed how one person can leave the room, leave your life, or even disappear for years, and yet somehow continue living inside your mind? You wake up and think of them. You drive to work and replay a conversation. You hear a song, pass a familiar street, or notice a certain expression on a stranger's face, and suddenly they are present again. Not physically, of course, but psychologically. Their voice comments on your decisions. Their imagined reaction influences what you wear, what you post, whom you date, and what you believe about yourself. Sometimes the person is someone you loved. Sometimes it is someone who rejected you, betrayed you, embarrassed you, or never gave you the closure you wanted. And sometimes the strangest part is that the relationship in your mind becomes more intense than the relationship ever was in real life. Carl Jung's psychology offers a powerful way to understand this experience. It suggests that when someone occupies too much space in your inner world, your mind may not be speaking only about that person. It may also be speaking through that person, using their image to reveal a hidden part of you. At first, this can sound confusing. If you cannot stop thinking about someone, the most obvious explanation seems to be that they must be uniquely important. Perhaps they are your soulmate. Perhaps they ruined your life. Perhaps you need one final conversation. Perhaps the universe keeps bringing them to mind because there is unfinished business between you. Those explanations can feel convincing because the emotion is real. But a real emotion does not always provide a literal interpretation of its cause. The person may matter, and the history may matter, but the intensity may come from something larger happening inside your own psyche. Jung believed that the unconscious does not usually introduce itself with a neat announcement. It arrives through dreams, fantasies, emotional reactions, attractions, fears, symbols, and repeated patterns. It borrows the faces of people around us. When one face becomes unusually powerful, it may be carrying more than the individual who owns it. It may be carrying our longing, shame, unlived potential, abandoned innocence, hunger for approval, fear of rejection, or desire to become whole. This is not an argument for pretending that other people do not affect us. Human beings need connection, and attachment can run deep. Loss hurts. Betrayal changes us. Love can reorganize an entire life. Nor is this an invitation to blame yourself for someone else's cruelty. If a person harmed you, responsibility for that behavior belongs to them. Jungian reflection asks a different question. After recognizing what actually happened, what has your mind built around it? What meaning did the event acquire? Which older wound did it touch? What role does the person now play inside you? These questions shift attention away from an endless investigation of someone else and toward the inner life you can influence. You may never learn exactly why they acted as they did. You may never receive the apology, explanation, or reunion you imagined. But you can learn why their image has become so charged, and that knowledge can return energy to your own life. Jung used the word projection to describe one of the central ways the unconscious enters relationships. Projection happens when we experience something within ourselves as though it belongs entirely to someone outside us. We do not knowingly decide to project. It is automatic. A quality, fear, fantasy, or possibility that we have not recognized in ourselves is placed onto another person, and then we respond to that person as if they truly contain all of it. This can be negative. We may see someone as unbearably arrogant because they express a confidence we have forbidden in ourselves. It can also be positive. We may see someone as almost magical because they seem to possess courage, beauty, freedom, creativity, tenderness, or spiritual depth that we cannot yet imagine as our own. The person becomes a screen on which the unconscious projects a hidden film. We see them, but we also see an image created from our history and unmet needs. Projection does not mean that everything you see in another person is imaginary. They may genuinely be charming, intelligent, manipulative, generous, avoidant, or brave. The issue is disproportion. When your reaction is much larger than the available evidence, when the person seems to represent salvation or total destruction, when you cannot hold a balanced view of their strengths and limits, projection may be adding psychological weight. You are no longer responding only to a human being. You are responding to a symbol. That is why facts often fail to loosen an obsession. Your friends can remind you that the relationship was inconsistent. You can list every broken promise. You can understand logically that the person was not right for you, and still feel pulled toward them. Logic speaks to the literal level, while the obsession may be operating at a symbolic one. The mind is not merely asking, "Who were they?" It may be asking, "What did they awaken in me?" Imagine a woman who has always been responsible, careful, and agreeable. She learned early that love was given when she behaved well and made life easy for others. Then she meets someone spontaneous and bold. He changes plans without guilt, travels alone, says what he thinks, and seems uninterested in approval. She falls for him with astonishing intensity. Maybe he has good qualities, and maybe their chemistry is genuine, but he also becomes the carrier of her unlived freedom. When he leaves, she believes she has lost the only person who could make her feel alive. For years, she thinks about him whenever her life feels narrow. Yet what she misses may not be only the man. She misses the self she experienced in his presence, playful, daring, sensual, and unafraid. Her task is not necessarily to win him back. Her deeper task may be to reclaim those qualities from the projection and begin living them herself. Now, imagine a man whose father was critical and emotionally distant. As a child, he worked constantly for a sign of approval that rarely came. As an adult, he becomes attached to a partner who is warm one day and unavailable the next. Every withdrawal activates him. He analyzes messages, changes himself, offers more, and tries to earn steady love. He tells himself that this particular person is irreplaceable, but his nervous system recognizes an ancient challenge. Perhaps this time, if he performs perfectly, the distant figure will finally choose him. The adult relationship is real, yet it is also connected to an older emotional pattern. His mind remains occupied because it is trying to finish a childhood story with a new actor. Until he sees that pattern, he may confuse familiar pain with profound destiny. One of the hardest truths in psychological growth is that familiarity can feel like chemistry. A person may feel instantly significant not because they are ideal for you, but because their way of relating matches a pattern your psyche already knows. If love once arrived unpredictably, unpredictability may create excitement. If you had to prove your worth, emotional distance may awaken determination. If conflict was followed by intense reconciliation, calm affection may initially feel dull. The mind can mistake activation for intimacy because activation feels vivid. You may say, "No one has ever made me feel this much," without asking what the feeling actually contains. Is it mutual trust? Or is it anxiety, longing, uncertainty, fantasy, and relief mixed together? Intensity is a measure of energy, not a guarantee of compatibility. Jung's idea of the complex helps explain why certain people seem to seize control of our thoughts. A complex is an emotionally charged cluster of memories, beliefs, images, and reactions organized around a theme. We might carry a mother complex, a father complex, an abandonment complex, an inferiority complex, or a power complex. When something activates that cluster, our reaction can become automatic. We may feel younger than our age, lose perspective, or behave in ways that surprise us. Jung famously suggested that complexes can act like partial personalities. In ordinary language, you might say, "I was not myself." From a Jungian perspective, a more precise statement might be, "A wounded part of me took over." The person on your mind may have activated such a part, and every imagined conversation keeps the complex alive. This is why you can be competent in most areas of life and still feel helpless around one specific person. You may manage a business, care for a family, solve complicated problems, and remain calm in emergencies. Then, a delayed text from this person sends you into panic. Your adult intelligence has not disappeared. It has been temporarily overshadowed by an emotional system carrying older material. A frightened child within you may be waiting to be chosen. A humiliated teenager may be trying to prove attractiveness. An abandoned partner may be scanning for danger. The goal is not to shame these reactions. Shame only pushes them further into darkness. The goal is to notice them with enough compassion and honesty that your adult self can return to the room. Ask yourself what age you feel when the person ignores you, criticizes you, or appears with someone else. Do you feel like the adult you are today, or do you suddenly feel small, replaceable, powerless, and desperate? What belief becomes active? Is it, "I am not enough, people always leave, I must fight to be loved," or, "If they do not validate me, I do not exist"? These sentences are more revealing than another hour spent analyzing the other person's social media. The mind often circles around an external figure because looking directly at the internal wound feels more painful. It may seem easier to ask why they did not call than to ask why silence feels like proof of worthlessness. Yet the second question is where freedom begins. When someone lives too much in your mind, fantasy often fills the spaces that reality left empty. This is especially common in ambiguous relationships. Perhaps there was no clear commitment, no clean ending, or no honest conversation. The brain dislikes incomplete patterns, so it keeps working. It reviews details and invents explanations. A glance becomes evidence. A song they shared becomes a secret message. A brief return becomes proof that the story is not over. Ambiguity allows projection to flourish because there are fewer facts to resist it. In a stable relationship, reality constantly corrects fantasy. You see the person when they are tired, impatient, ordinary, and imperfect. In a distant or unavailable relationship, imagination can preserve an edited version indefinitely. You may not be missing an actual shared life. You may be missing a future that never had the chance to become ordinary. This kind of grief is real, but it is unusual because you are grieving possibility. You remember not only what happened, but everything that might have happened. Vacations never taken, mornings never shared, apologies never spoken, and versions of yourself you expected to become. The imagined future can be flawless because it never faced bills, illness, boredom, conflicting priorities, or the daily negotiations of intimacy. Reality cannot compete with a life that exists only in potential. To heal, you must allow yourself to mourn the dream without turning the dream into evidence that the person was destined for you. Sometimes we keep someone mentally alive because the alternative feels like admitting that our investment was misplaced. We gave years, trust, money, loyalty, or hope. If the story ends, we fear that all of it becomes meaningless. So the mind negotiates. Maybe they will return transformed. Maybe one explanation will make every contradiction disappear. Maybe our suffering will be rewarded. This is not stupidity. It is a human attempt to protect meaning. But meaning does not require the relationship to continue. An experience can shape you without defining your future. Love can have been sincere, even if the partnership was unsustainable. A chapter can matter without becoming the entire book. You do not recover your past investment by sacrificing more of your present. The shadow is another Jungian idea that can illuminate obsession. The shadow contains qualities we do not accept as part of our conscious identity. Some are painful or destructive, such as envy, selfishness, aggression, or the wish to control. Others are healthy powers we learn to suppress, such as ambition, assertiveness, sensuality, humor, independence, and the ability to say no. We tend to meet the shadow in strong reactions. The person we cannot stop hating may display a trait we fear in ourselves. The person we cannot stop idealizing may express a capacity we secretly possess but have never developed. In both cases, attention sticks because the other person stands near a locked door within us. Suppose you are consumed by anger toward a coworker who promotes every accomplishment and confidently asks for opportunities. Perhaps the coworker really is self-centered. But if your reaction follows you home and occupies your evenings, another question becomes useful. Where have you made yourself invisible? Were you taught that wanting recognition was shameful? Do you wait for others to notice your work while resenting anyone who speaks for themselves? Your irritation may contain moral judgment, but it may also contain unused ambition. Integrating the shadow does not mean copying the coworker's worst behavior. It means recovering the healthy energy hidden inside your reaction. You can learn to name your contribution, ask clearly, and tolerate being seen without becoming arrogant. Or suppose you cannot forget a former partner who appeared emotionally fearless. She could leave a conversation, set a boundary, and continue with her day, while you felt compelled to explain everything. You may label her cold, and perhaps she sometimes was. Yet your fixation could also reveal your own undeveloped ability to separate. If you have always confused love with self-abandonment, anyone who protects their autonomy may look heartless. Your work is not to become detached from all feeling. It is to discover that boundaries and care can coexist. The very trait you condemn in exaggerated form may contain a medicine you need in balanced form. Projection gives away energy. If someone else carries all the beauty, confidence, intelligence, mystery, or power, you experience yourself as empty beside them. You become dependent on access to them because they seem to hold your missing life. This creates an unequal psychological arrangement, even when both people appear equal on the surface. You may tolerate disrespect because losing them feels like losing the only bridge to vitality. You may reshape your opinions and personality to remain close. The more you abandon yourself, the more extraordinary they seem, because your abandoned qualities continue gathering around their image. Eventually, they appear enormous and you appear small. The way out begins by asking what you have placed in their hands. Make a simple inventory. Complete the sentence. This person is the only one who made me feel. Perhaps the answer is attractive, safe, adventurous, understood, creative, wanted, protected, intelligent, rebellious, calm, or alive. Do not dismiss the answer. It identifies something precious. Then ask, what conditions allowed that part of me to appear? Maybe you danced because they loved music. Maybe you spoke honestly because they listened. Maybe you traveled because they encouraged risk. Now, separate the capacity from the person. They may have invited it, but they did not manufacture it. Your laughter came from your body. Your courage moved through your choices. Your tenderness belonged to your heart. Another human being may have opened a door, but the room was already yours. This distinction can feel emotionally threatening. If the beauty was yours, then you carry responsibility for bringing it back into life. Longing is painful, but it can also be passive. It allows you to wait for the person who once gave you permission. Reclaiming projection means becoming the person who gives that permission now. If you admired someone's creativity, make something imperfect. If you admired their independence, Spend an afternoon alone by choice. If they made you feel desirable, care for your body as someone worthy of affection instead of using their attention as a mirror. If they represented intellectual depth, read, study, write, and enter conversations that challenge you. Each action withdraws a little energy from the inner idol and returns it to your lived identity. Jung called the lifelong movement towards psychological wholeness individuation. Individuation is not selfish isolation, and it is not the fantasy of becoming completely independent. It is the process of becoming more fully yourself by bringing unconscious material into a conscious relationship with your life. You begin to distinguish your actual values from inherited expectations. You recognize the roles you perform, the wounds that drive you, the qualities you reject, and the symbols that guide you. You become less controlled by what you cannot see. A consuming attachment can become part of this process if you approach it as a message rather than a command. The intensity says, pay attention. It does not necessarily say, pursue this person. That may be one of the most important sentences to remember. A feeling can deserve attention without dictating action. You can honor longing without sending the message. You can admit love without returning to a harmful relationship. You can acknowledge anger without seeking revenge. You can feel jealousy without violating someone's privacy. Psychological maturity creates space between emotion and behavior. Inside that space, you can ask what the feeling wants you to know. Perhaps longing reveals a need for intimacy. Perhaps jealousy reveals a neglected dream. Perhaps anger reveals a crossed boundary. Once the message is understood, you can choose an action that serves your whole life rather than obeying the immediate impulse. Many people stay trapped because they believe healing requires the disappearance of thought. They monitor themselves constantly. Why am I thinking of them again? I should be over this. Something must be wrong with me. That struggle adds a second layer of suffering. The original thought appears, and then self-judgment gives it more energy. A more useful response is gentle recognition. Their image is here again. Something in me has been activated. You do not have to invite the thought to stay, and you do not have to fight it as an enemy. Notice it, name the emotion beneath it, and return attention to the present. Repetition may continue for a while. Healing is often measured not by whether a thought appears, but by whether it controls what happens next. The mind strengthens whatever it repeatedly rehearses. Every time you replay an argument, imagine a reunion, check an account, or compose a message you never send, you deepen a pathway. The behavior may provide a moment of relief because it creates a sense of contact or control. But relief is not the same as resolution. The loop often returns stronger. This is why insight alone may not be enough. You can understand projection beautifully and still feed the obsession through daily habits. Inner work must eventually become practical. Remove unnecessary triggers. Stop asking mutual friends for updates. Archive old conversations if rereading them keeps reopening the wound. Create friction between the impulse and the action. A 10-minute delay, a walk, a call to a trusted friend, or a written note about what you are feeling can interrupt the automatic sequence. These boundaries are not punishment. They are containers for healing. If you keep touching a physical wound, the body cannot close it. The same principle can apply psychologically. Constant exposure may maintain activation, especially after a breakup, betrayal, or unreciprocated attachment. You do not need to prove strength by watching the person's life from a distance. You do not need to demonstrate maturity by remaining available for casual contact that leaves you destabilized for days. A boundary can be quiet. It does not require an announcement designed to produce a reaction. Its purpose is not to make the other person miss you. Its purpose is to protect the part of you that is learning to return home. Be honest about hidden bargains. Sometimes no contact is secretly used as a strategy to get someone back. You count days and imagine the moment they realize your value. Your attention remains organized around them, even in silence. Genuine separation has a different center. It asks, what helps me recover reality, dignity, and choice? You may still hope, and you do not need to lie about that hope. But you stop building your days around whether hope is rewarded. You begin making decisions that would remain good for you even if the person never returned. This is where a boundary becomes an act of self-respect rather than a form of manipulation. If the person is still part of your life, the work becomes more subtle. A spouse, parent, co-worker, or co-parent cannot always be avoided, and avoidance would not necessarily solve the inner pattern. In those cases, aim for clean contact. Respond to what is actually said rather than the entire history your body expects. Clarify agreements. Limit conversations to appropriate subjects when needed. Notice when you are seeking an emotional response the person has repeatedly shown they cannot provide. Stop assigning them a role they do not consent to or cannot fulfill. Reality may be painful, but it is more stable than fantasy. Seeing a person clearly is one of the deepest forms of release. Clear seeing includes both sides. Idealization turns someone into a savior. Demonization turns them into a monster. Both can keep you attached because both make the person larger than human. A more integrated view allows contradiction. They may have been tender and unreliable. They may have loved you and lacked the capacity to build a healthy partnership. They may have harmed you and still possess good qualities. You may have made mistakes without being entirely responsible for the outcome. This complexity is not moral confusion. It is psychological accuracy. When you no longer need the person to be perfect or completely evil, their image begins to shrink to human size. Jung's work often returned to the tension of opposites. Growth does not always come from choosing one side and eliminating the other. It can come from holding two truths long enough for a new understanding to emerge. You can miss someone and know that contact is unwise. You can forgive them and maintain a boundary. You can appreciate what the relationship gave you and refuse what it became. You can recognize your projection and still acknowledge their responsibility. You can love an image of what might have been while accepting what is. The psyche becomes less rigid when it can tolerate these pairs. Obsession often demands a single dramatic answer. Wholeness can hold a more complicated truth. Closure is often misunderstood as information delivered by another person. We imagine a perfect conversation in which every confusing moment is explained, every wound is acknowledged, and both people agree on what the relationship meant. Such conversations occasionally happen, but even then, they may not produce peace. The explanation can create new questions. The apology can feel incomplete. The person may remember events differently. If your inner stability depends on their version of the story, you remain psychologically tied to their willingness and capacity. Closure is more often a decision to stop requiring the past to become different before you allow yourself to live. This does not mean suppressing questions. Write them down. Give each one an honest answer based on the evidence available. Why was I not chosen? May become, I cannot know every reason, but this relationship did not become mutual and secure. Did they ever love me? May become, there were moments of care, but the form of love available did not meet what I need. Was I foolish? May become, I acted from hope, attachment, and the understanding I had at the time. Mature answers are rarely dramatic. They do not solve the mystery of another mind. They restore your relationship with reality. Pay attention to the inner conversations you rehearse. In fantasy, you may finally deliver the perfect speech. You may prove the person wrong, make them regret leaving, or show them how successful you became. These scenes reveal where your power feels trapped. If you imagine proving your worth, a part of you still treats them as the judge. If you imagine their jealousy, you may still measure success through their attention. If you imagine rescuing them, you may still need to be indispensable. Do not shame the fantasy. Translate it. Ask what emotional outcome you are seeking. Recognition, vindication, safety, importance. Then consider how to pursue that need in a way that does not require their participation. Perhaps you want to be seen. Begin by seeing yourself accurately. Keep promises you make to yourself. Record what you accomplish before dismissing it. Spend time with people capable of mutual interest. Perhaps you want justice. Name what happened, establish consequences where appropriate, and stop volunteering for the same treatment. Perhaps you want an apology. Write the apology you deserved, not to impersonate the other person, but to clarify the truth your pain needs acknowledged. Perhaps you want to matter. Invest in work, friendship, service, art, and community, where your presence has real consequences. No substitute erases the original loss, but a larger life prevents one person from becoming the sole source of meaning. Dreams may also become vivid when someone occupies the mind. Jung considered dreams communications from the unconscious, though they should not be treated like literal predictions. If you dream that the person returns, it does not necessarily mean they will call. The dream figure may represent a quality, conflict, or emotional pattern. Notice the setting, mood, and action. Are you chasing them through an unfamiliar house? Are they silent while you try to speak? Are they carrying something that belongs to you? Rather than asking only, "What does this say about them?" ask, "What part of me behaves like this figure? What is being pursued? What is not being heard? What wants to return?" Dream work is most useful when it expands self-understanding, not when it becomes fortune-telling. The same caution applies to signs and coincidences. When you are emotionally focused on someone, your attention becomes sensitized to anything associated with them. You notice their name, hometown, favorite car, birthday numbers, and favorite songs. This does not make you irrational. It demonstrates how selective attention works. Jung's concept of synchronicity explored meaningful coincidence, but it was not a blank check for interpreting every repeated symbol as an instruction to contact someone. A coincidence may invite reflection without prescribing behavior. Ask what meaning the event has for your inner life. Then test any decision against consent, evidence, values, and practical consequences. Mystery and responsibility can coexist. There is a seductive identity hidden inside some forms of longing, the identity of the one who waits. Waiting can feel loyal, romantic, and morally superior. It allows you to preserve a story about the depth of your love. Yet it can also protect you from risk. As long as your heart belongs to an unavailable person, you do not have to face the uncertainty of available intimacy. You can compare every new person to an idealized memory and conclude that no one measures up. You remain devoted, but also protected. Real relationships require vulnerability in the present. They include negotiation, disappointment, ordinary affection, and the frightening possibility of being truly known. Sometimes the ghost in your mind guards the door against the living. Ask what moving on would require you to face. Would you have to admit that you are lonely? Would you need to learn new social skills, leave a stagnant routine, or risk rejection again? Would you lose a story that has explained your sadness for years? Would happiness feel like a betrayal of what the relationship meant? These questions are not accusations. They identify the secondary function of attachment. A painful pattern can survive because it protects us from another pain we have not named. When you understand the protection, you can thank it and choose a healthier form of safety. Sometimes the person living in your mind is not a lost lover, but a critic. It may be a parent, teacher, former boss, bully, or ex-partner whose judgment became internalized. Long after contact ends, you anticipate their disapproval. You hear their phrases in your own self-talk. You hesitate before taking a risk because you can imagine their laugh. In Jungian terms, the outer authority has become an inner figure. Simply avoiding the person does not remove the figure because it now participates in your identity. You must learn to recognize which voice is speaking. Ask, whose standard is this? Do I agree with it? What would I say if someone spoke this way to a person I love? An internalized critic often claims to protect you. It says that harshness will prevent failure, embarrassment, rejection, or laziness. But chronic humiliation does not produce secure excellence. It narrows attention and makes experimentation dangerous. You do not overcome the critic by replacing every negative thought with empty praise. You develop a fairer inner authority. This voice can say, "That choice did not work," and we can learn from it, instead of, "You ruin everything." It can distinguish behavior from identity. It can recognize effort without denying consequences. Over time, the inherited voice loses its monopoly. The person may still appear in memory, but they no longer have the final vote. Anger can keep someone in the mind as powerfully as love. You may replay the injustice because forgetting feels like surrender. Part of you believes that constant mental prosecution keeps the truth alive. Yet your rumination does not reach the other person. It repeatedly exposes your own body to the event. The heart speeds up, muscles tighten, and the nervous system prepares for a conflict that is not happening now. Releasing rumination is not the same as declaring the behavior acceptable. Memory can remain, boundaries can remain, and accountability can remain. What changes is your willingness to make your inner world a permanent courtroom in which the same case is tried every day. If practical action is available, take it through appropriate channels. Document facts, seek support, consult qualified professionals when needed, or state a boundary clearly. But distinguish action from rehearsal. Action moves toward an outcome. Rehearsal repeats pain without changing conditions. After doing what can reasonably be done, you may need a ritual of completion. Write the facts in plain language. Name what was lost. Name what you learned. Decide what standard will guide you now. Then place the document away, destroy it safely, or keep it as a record you do not revisit compulsively. The psyche often responds to symbolic acts because they give form to an invisible transition. Forgiveness is optional, personal, and frequently misunderstood. You do not need to forgive on a schedule, and forgiveness does not require reconciliation. It does not erase accountability or restore access. For some people, forgiveness means releasing the wish to remain emotionally organized around the offense. For others, the more honest goal is acceptance. This happened. I did not deserve it. I cannot change it. I will protect my life now. Do not use spiritual language to bypass anger that needs to be recognized. Anger can show you where a boundary was violated. But after its message is received, ask whether carrying it indefinitely serves the future you want. The body deserves attention in this process. Obsessive thought is not only a philosophical problem, it can be tied to states of arousal, exhaustion, isolation, and stress. Notice when the person becomes loudest in your mind. Is it late at night, after drinking, during conflict, on weekends, or when you feel physically depleted? You may interpret the thought as a revelation when it is partly a signal that your system needs sleep, nourishment, movement, sunlight, or companionship. Basic care is not a shallow answer to deep emotion. The psyche lives through a body. A regulated body gives reflection more room. Try grounding in the immediate world. Name what you see. Feel your feet against the floor. Slow the exhale. Identify the date and your present location. Say, "That happened then. I am here now." This is particularly useful when a memory feels immersive. You are not trying to erase the past. You are reminding the nervous system that memory is not the same as current danger. If intrusive thoughts, trauma symptoms, depression, or anxiety significantly disrupt your life, support from a licensed mental health professional can be valuable. Jungian ideas can offer meaning, but they are not a substitute for individualized care. Loneliness often magnifies the mental presence of one person. When emotional life becomes narrow, the mind returns to its most charged material because little else competes for attention. The solution is not frantic distraction. It is diversification of meaning. Imagine your life as an ecosystem. If one relationship becomes the only source of intimacy, adventure, affirmation, and belonging, its loss devastates the whole system. A resilient life has multiple roots: friends, family where safe, creative practice, work, learning, physical activity, community, solitude, and service. No single root replaces another, but together they make it less likely that one absence will define the entire landscape. Building that ecosystem can feel mechanical at first. You may attend dinner and think of the person. You may begin a class and feel no enthusiasm. Do not conclude too quickly that nothing else matters. The mind needs repeated contact with new sources of reward and identity. Meaning often grows after participation, not before it. Choose small commitments that do not depend on motivation. Walk with a neighbor once a week. Volunteer twice a month. Join a group centered on a genuine interest. Call the friend you keep meaning to contact. Prepare one meal with full attention. These actions seem ordinary, and that is their strength. They place life back in time instead of leaving it suspended around a memory. Creativity can transform psychological energy that has become trapped in repetition. Write fiction inspired by the emotional truth without reproducing the literal story. Paint the mood. Learn an instrument. Build something with your hands. Dance. Garden. The aim is not to create impressive art or send a hidden message to the person. It is to give the inner experience another form. Jung believed that symbols could mediate between conscious and unconscious life. Creative work lets emotion change shape. What could only appear as a face in memory may become a color, rhythm, character, landscape, or insight. Once expressed, the energy can participate in life again. Journaling can help if it is structured. Unbounded writing sometimes turns into another form of rumination, so give it a purpose and a time limit. Divide a page into 3 parts. First, record the facts without interpretation. Second, name the thoughts and emotions that arose. Third, identify what you need or what action is available. For example, fact: they did not reply for 5 days. Thought: I am unimportant. Emotion: fear and shame. Need: consistency and respect. Action: stop pursuing unclear contact and speak with someone trustworthy. This method separates the event from the meaning automatically assigned to it. It also brings attention back to choice. You can add a Jungian question. What quality am I being asked to develop? If the person's silence activates helplessness, perhaps the quality is self-trust. If their success activates envy, perhaps the quality is committed ambition. If their independence activates fear, perhaps the quality is inner stability. If their warmth activates grief, perhaps the quality is receptivity to safe connection. The answer should not excuse harmful behavior. It should identify the developmental invitation hidden within your reaction. Pain may not have arrived for a purpose, but you can still create purpose from how you respond. Be careful with the phrase, "everything happens for a reason." It can become a way of romanticizing suffering or remaining attached to people who repeatedly cause harm. A Jungian approach does not require believing that every event was arranged for your growth. It asks whether the psyche can work with what occurred. Meaning can be discovered and constructed after the fact. You can say, "I would not choose what happened, but I will not let it remain useless." This position respects both reality and agency. Another helpful exercise is to write 2 descriptions of the person. In the first, describe the idealized or demonized figure who occupies your mind. In the second, describe the actual human being using observable behavior. The first might say, "She was the only person who truly understood me." The second might say, "She listened deeply during some conversations and withdrew during conflict." The first might say, "He destroyed my ability to trust." The second might say, "He lied, and I now notice that I generalize his behavior to new people." The symbolic description reveals your emotional world. The factual description restores proportion. You need both. Then write two descriptions of yourself. One from the perspective of the activated complex, and one from the perspective of your adult life. The activated part may say, "I am abandoned, unwanted, and powerless." The adult perspective may say, "I am grieving, I have survived loss before, I have choices, and several people care about me." Do not force the wounded part to disappear. Let the adult part sit beside it. Integration is not domination. It is a relationship between different parts of the psyche in which no single wound gets to define the whole person. Compassion matters because the mind's attachment often began as an attempt to protect something vulnerable. The child who monitored a parent's mood was trying to stay connected. The teenager who obsessed over approval was trying to belong. The adult who replayed betrayal was trying to prevent another surprise. These strategies may now be costly, but they were not born from weakness. Approach them with respect. Say, "I understand why you are watching. I understand why you want an answer, but we have more choices now." An inner voice that combines warmth with direction is more transformative than contempt. At the same time, compassion must include accountability. You may have crossed boundaries, used another person for emotional regulation, ignored clear rejection, or confused persistence with devotion. Pain explains behavior. It does not automatically justify it. If you caused harm, acknowledge it without making the other person responsible for relieving your guilt. Offer a concise apology when appropriate, and when contact itself would not violate a boundary. Then change the behavior. Self-forgiveness becomes credible when it is connected to responsibility. You are not condemned to remain the person you were at your most activated, but growth requires an honest view of what happened. Respecting another person's autonomy is essential. Your sense of a deep bond does not create an obligation for them to participate. A dream, intuition, coincidence, or powerful inner experience is not consent. If someone has said no, blocked contact, asked for space, or consistently declined engagement, the psychologically mature response is to accept the boundary. You can explore the meaning privately, with a journal, trusted friend, spiritual advisor, or therapist. The more sacred an emotion feels, the more carefully it should be held. Sacred does not mean entitled. If contact is mutual and a conversation is appropriate, enter it with a modest goal. Do not expect one discussion to heal every layer of projection and history. Speak from observable experience. Say what you felt, what you need, and what you are asking now. Listen for the actual answer, including an answer you dislike. Avoid presenting your interpretation of their unconscious as fact. Jungian concepts are tools for self-reflection, not weapons for diagnosing others. Saying, "You are triggering my abandonment complex because you fear intimacy," may sound insightful while avoiding a simpler truth. This pattern does not work for me. Use psychology to take responsibility, not to win an argument. There is a difference between being remembered and being inhabited. We all carry people within us. A grandparent's kindness may guide a decision. A teacher's confidence may encourage us. A lost friend may remain part of our moral imagination. Healthy remembrance does not require erasure. The goal is not an empty mind in which no one has left a mark. The goal is a spacious inner world where memories can visit without taking over the house. The person becomes one figure in a larger story, rather than the secret author of every chapter. How do you know that this shift is happening? You may still think of them, but the thought contains less urgency. You can remember a good moment without immediately building a future around it. You can remember harm without losing the rest of the day. You become curious about your own life again. Decisions are based less on what they would think. Their social media loses its magnetic pull. New people are allowed to be themselves rather than compared to a ghost. The image becomes more realistic, and your own personality becomes more vivid. Healing often arrives quietly as an increase in available attention. Attention is one of your most precious forms of life. Where attention goes, time follows. Where time goes, identity forms. If hours are repeatedly spent in imaginary contact, those hours cannot be invested in actual relationships, skills, rest, play, and discovery. This is not a reason to attack yourself for thinking. It is a reason to value attention enough to guide it. Ask each morning, what deserves my living attention today? The answer may be a child, a project, a difficult conversation, a neglected body, a friend, a home, or a moment of silence. Give something real the energy that fantasy has been consuming. The word real is important. Obsession often lives in abstraction. What they meant, what could happen, what they might feel, what the relationship symbolizes. Reality is sensory and specific. The coffee is warm. The dog needs a walk. The report is due. The sky is changing. A friend is speaking. Your breath moves. Returning to reality is not a retreat from depth. It is where depth becomes embodied. Jung's psychology was concerned with symbols, but individuation is lived through choices. An insight that never changes behavior can become another beautiful hiding place. Consider the persona, Jung's term for the social mask or role we present to the world. The persona is necessary. Different settings require different expressions. Problems arise when we mistake the role for the whole self. A relationship may become obsessive because one person saw behind your persona. Maybe everyone knows you as strong, funny, successful, or calm, while this person witnessed your fear and tenderness. Losing them can feel like losing the only witness to your hidden self. But the solution is not always to recover the witness. It may be to create a life where you do not have to hide so completely. Practice honest vulnerability with people who have earned trust. Let more of your inner life become shareable. The reverse can also happen. Perhaps the person only loved your persona. They admired the useful version, the agreeable version, the endlessly capable version, or the glamorous version. You worked to maintain that image because their approval felt precious. When the relationship ended, you did not only lose them, you lost the stage on which the persona performed. Now you may feel invisible. This discomfort can become an opportunity. Who are you when you are not managing their impression? What do you enjoy when it produces no admiration? What beliefs remain when you stop rehearsing how you will explain them? Solitude can feel empty at first, because the audience has left. Stay long enough, and it may become a workshop. In that workshop, experiment with small acts that contradict the old pattern. If you always over-explained, give a simple answer. If you pursued, pause. If you hid desire, state a preference. If you performed competence, ask for help. If you waited for permission, make a reasonable choice. If you escaped into fantasy, complete one concrete task. These acts may not feel dramatic, but they teach the psyche that another life is possible. Repetition builds a new center of gravity. You may experience resistance. A part of you will say that no one else compares, that self-development is a consolation prize, or that letting go makes the love less meaningful. Listen closely. The resistance may fear that if you reclaim your energy, the bond will disappear. Reassure it. Significance does not require captivity. You can honor what happened without remaining psychologically frozen. The relationship's place in your history cannot be stolen by your recovery. In fact, seeing it clearly may honor it more than endless idealization, because you allow it to be what it was rather than forcing it to carry your entire future. There may also be grief for your own lost time. Once the projection begins to withdraw, you might see years spent waiting, chasing, proving, or replaying. This recognition can trigger shame. Try not to convert awakening into another punishment. You made choices from the consciousness available then. Now you see more, and seeing more creates responsibility for what comes next. Regret can be useful if it becomes a boundary around the future. It becomes destructive when it is used to keep reliving the past under a new name. Say to yourself, I wish I had known, and now I know. Let that sentence mark a transition. You cannot rescue the earlier version of you by hating them. You can rescue what they were searching for. Perhaps they wanted love, freedom, recognition, safety, or permission to exist. Give those needs a wiser path now. Become the reliable person they hoped would arrive. This is not a claim that we can meet every need alone. We remain relational beings. It means you stop abandoning yourself while asking someone else to stay. Healthy love becomes more possible when projection is recognized. Without that recognition, we ask partners to carry archetypal weight. They must be perfect parent, healer, muse, protector, redeemer, and proof that our life matters. No human being can sustain those roles. Admiration turns into disappointment when ordinary limitations appear. Mature love does not eliminate projection completely. People will always awaken symbolic material in one another. But mature love becomes curious about the difference between the person and the image. It allows two imperfect subjects to meet, rather than demanding that one person complete the other's myth. This is why withdrawing projection does not make relationships less romantic. It can make them more intimate. You begin to ask, who are you beyond what I need you to represent? You listen to answers. You notice incompatibility without treating it as betrayal. You communicate needs instead of expecting mind reading. You accept that love does not erase difference. You bring your own developing life to the relationship rather than arriving as an empty container. The other person is no longer forced to be your missing soul. They can become a companion with a soul of their own. For someone who is single after a consuming attachment, this perspective changes how new connection is approached. Instead of searching for the same instant intensity, you might become interested in consistency. Instead of asking only, do they excite me? You also ask, can we repair misunderstandings? Do their actions match their words? Can I remain myself here? Is affection mutual? Does my body feel safe enough to be curious? Calm may initially seem unfamiliar. Give it time. Fireworks are visible, but a hearth is what warms a home. Do not turn this into a rigid rule that strong attraction is always unhealthy. Attraction can be joyful, and passion can coexist with security. The point is to observe what accompanies intensity. Does it expand your life or consume it? Can you think clearly? Are boundaries respected? Is there reciprocity? Do you feel more authentic, or are you constantly auditioning? Can the relationship survive ordinary reality? These questions protect romance from fantasy without draining it of wonder. If the person on your mind has died, the process carries a different tenderness. Grief is not a problem to solve, and an ongoing inner relationship with someone who died can be healthy. You may speak to them in memory, carry their values, or feel their presence in symbolic ways. Concern arises mainly when grief leaves you unable to participate in life for a prolonged period or creates overwhelming distress. In that case, bereavement support or professional care may help. The Jungian question remains gentle. What part of the bond wants to live through you now? A loved one's physical absence may become an invitation to embody what you received from them. Perhaps they taught courage, patience, humor, craftsmanship, or compassion. Each time you practice that quality, the relationship changes form. You are not leaving them behind. You are carrying the bond forward in a way that serves life. Grief and renewal can coexist. Loyalty to the dead does not require joining them psychologically. the life they touched is still asking to be lived. For those dealing with betrayal or abuse, remember that meaning-making should never pressure you to minimize danger. The first priority is safety. Seek qualified help and trusted support, especially if there are threats, stalking, coercion, or violence. Jungian reflection belongs after and alongside practical protection, not in place of it. Do not search your shadow for a reason someone abused you. Their choice remains theirs. Your inner work concerns healing the effects, rebuilding trust in your perception, and reclaiming the parts of life that fear has occupied. There is strength in saying, I do not need to understand their psychology to protect myself. Curiosity can become a trap when it keeps attention fixed on the person who caused harm. You may research personality labels, attachment styles, and diagnostic terms, hoping that the correct category will finally bring peace. Information can validate patterns, but it can also extend contact in the mind. Eventually, the central question becomes less about what they are and more about what you will do with what you know. A clear boundary often heals more than a perfect label. Notice, too, the role of digital technology. Previous generations could separate from someone and encounter only occasional reminders. Today, a person can remain continuously present through photos, stories, activity indicators, playlists, location features, and mutual networks. The mind receives tiny fragments and builds narratives around them. Each check may feel harmless, but together they create an artificial relationship made of surveillance and interpretation. You know what they ate, where they traveled, and whom they followed, but you do not actually share a life. Data creates the illusion of closeness without mutuality. Design your digital environment deliberately. Mute, unfollow, restrict, block, or remove shortcuts when needed. Turn off memory features that surface old photos unexpectedly. Ask friends not to send updates. These decisions can feel severe because technology has normalized constant access. Yet access is not a moral right, and visibility is not intimacy. Protecting attention is part of psychological hygiene. You are allowed to make the past less convenient to visit. When the urge to check appears, pause and identify the promise behind it. If I look, I will feel connected. If I look, I will know whether they miss me. If I look, I can prepare for bad news. Then, observe what actually happens after checking. Do you feel peaceful, or do you spend the next hour interpreting? Gather evidence from your own experience. The goal is not to obey a rule imposed from outside. It is to understand the true cost of the behavior. Once the promise is exposed as unreliable, the urge becomes easier to question. Create a replacement ritual for vulnerable moments. If you usually check at night, place the phone outside the bedroom and keep a book nearby. If mornings trigger memories, step outdoors before opening social apps. If loneliness after work sends you into old messages, schedule a walk, workout, or call during that hour. Replacement matters because the mind dislikes a vacuum. You are not merely removing a behavior, you are giving the underlying need another route. Over time, you may discover that the person represented a threshold. Before meeting them, you lived in one way. Through the relationship or its loss, something became impossible to ignore. Perhaps you saw how little affection you had accepted. Perhaps you discovered a creative life you had postponed. Perhaps heartbreak cracked a persona that had looked successful but felt empty. Threshold figures often feel fated because they appear at moments of transformation. Their role may be profound without being permanent. A guide can lead you to a door without walking through it with you. The temptation is to kneel at the door and worship the guide. Individuation asks you to cross. What is the next life implied by what you learned? If the relationship awakened a hunger for depth, where will you cultivate depth? If it exposed a pattern of self-erasure, what boundary will you practice? If it revealed your capacity to love, Where else can that love flow? Do not reduce the lesson to, I must forget. A better aim is, I must become capable of carrying forward what was awakened. This work is rarely linear. An anniversary, dream, illness, move, or new relationship may reactivate old feelings. Recurrence does not mean failure. The psyche revisits material from different levels of development. A memory that once felt like catastrophe may later feel like sadness, then tenderness, then information. Each return offers a chance to respond from the person you have become. Instead of asking, why am I back at the beginning? Ask, what is different in how I meet this now? Maybe you no longer send the message. Maybe you recover in an hour instead of a week. Maybe you notice the younger part before it takes over. Maybe you can wish the person well without imagining reunion. These are substantial changes. Healing is often visible in behavior before it is complete in feeling. Let progress be imperfect and real. Develop a personal statement for moments of activation. Keep it truthful, brief, and grounded. You might say, this person mattered, and my life is larger than this bond. The feeling is real, but it is not an instruction. I can care for the part of me that is afraid. I choose actions that respect reality, consent, and my future. Repeat it slowly, not as magic, but as orientation. In an emotional storm, orientation matters more than argument. You can also imagine gathering back the qualities you projected. Picture the person standing at a respectful distance. Notice the light, power, beauty, or danger surrounding their image. Ask which parts truly belong to their behavior and which parts emerged from your own psyche. Then imagine the courage, creativity, tenderness, or authority returning to you. This is a symbolic exercise, not a supernatural claim. Its purpose is to help the mind represent a change that ordinary language may struggle to express. End by naming one concrete action that embodies the reclaimed quality today. If you projected danger, reclaim discernment rather than aggression. If you projected beauty, reclaim your ability to perceive and create beauty. If you projected authority, reclaim decision-making. If you projected freedom, make a choice consistent with your values. If you projected home, build routines and relationships that create belonging. The image loses its grip when symbolism becomes practice. There will come a moment, perhaps so ordinary that you almost miss it, when you realize you have gone several hours without thinking of them. Later, it may be a day. The discovery can bring relief and also grief. A part of you may call the fading a second loss. Let yourself feel both. Forgetting the intensity does not erase the truth. Memory does not have to hurt in order to prove that love existed. Peace is not betrayal. Eventually, the question changes. At first you asked, how do I get them out of my mind? Then you asked, why do they live there? Now you may ask, what kind of mind and life am I building? This is the deeper turn. You stop organizing growth around escape from one person and begin orienting toward wholeness. The former attachment becomes part of the material, but not the destination. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means greater capacity to include your contradictions without being ruled by them. You are strong and vulnerable, independent and relational, loving and capable of anger, wounded and responsible. You can desire someone and decline a harmful pattern. You can carry memory and remain present. You can be shaped by the past without surrendering authorship of the future. This is the quiet dignity of individuation. So if someone is living too much in your mind today, begin without force. Do not demand immediate erasure. Sit down, breathe, and ask what their image is carrying. Is it a lost future, an old wound, an unlived quality, a need for recognition, a fear of abandonment, or a part of yourself you met only in their presence? Write the answer plainly. Then ask what reality requires. Perhaps it requires grief, perhaps a boundary, perhaps accountability, perhaps professional support, perhaps a brave step into a neglected life. Remember that understanding is not the same as permission. You may understand why you are attached and still choose distance. You may understand why they behaved as they did and still refuse the behavior. You may understand your childhood pattern and still insist on adult reciprocity. Insight should increase choice. If it only produces more elaborate reasons to remain stuck, return to the facts. The person in your mind may have been a mirror, a messenger, a wound, a teacher, a companion, or several of these at once. But they are not the totality of your inner world. Behind their image are rooms you have not entered, abilities you have not practiced, relationships you have not formed, and days you have not lived. Your task is not to destroy the image. It is to place it in proportion and continue exploring the house. You may always carry a trace of them. Let that trace become wisdom instead of a chain. Let it remind you to notice projection, to respect boundaries, to value consistency, to listen to the body, to welcome the shadow, and to reclaim the qualities you once believed belonged only to someone else. Let it make you more capable of seeing people as they are and yourself as you are becoming. One day, the voice in your mind will sound less like theirs and more like your own. Not the old voice built from fear, performance, or borrowed judgment, but a steadier voice. It will tell you when to stay and when to leave. It will allow longing without surrendering direction. It will recognize love without confusing it with possession. It will protect tenderness without hiding from life. That voice is not created in a single revelation. It is built through every small moment in which you choose consciousness over compulsion. And when you hear that voice, you may finally understand what the obsession was trying, imperfectly, to reveal. You were not only searching for another person. You were searching for the parts of yourself that appeared around them. You were searching for a lost feeling of aliveness, a hidden courage, a silenced need, or a home within your own psyche. The search became painful because it was directed entirely outward. But the energy can return, the qualities can be lived, the wound can be cared for, the future can become real again. The person may remain in memory, but they no longer need to occupy the center. That place belongs to the living relationship between your conscious choices and your deeper self. From that center, you can remember without chasing, grieve without disappearing, love without abandoning yourself, and step forward without needing the past to follow. Your mind becomes yours again, not because no one else is present within it, but because you have become present there too.